Hello, fellow gamers, and welcome to the Video Gamers Podcast. The Nintendo Direct announcing the Switch 2 was just released, and opinions are divided. We wanted to make sure to present a well-rounded opinion and viewpoint on this new contender in the console market. And so today we have a very special guest joining us. My name is John, and from our Discord community, we have Mo. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hey there, I'm Mo. You guys in the server know me as MoBox. If you couldn't tell, I may be a bit of a Nintendo fan. Growing up just both with Nintendo and Xbox primarily, so I'm really excited about this.
Well, that's cool. And Mo, I got to say thank you for the opportunity to actually do this with you today. We talk often about how great our Discord community is. You obviously are a very active member of our Discord community. You are also a streamer. You, like me, are a fellow console diehard. So it's really cool to have you on my side in this. But as you mentioned just now, you are a Nintendo fan.
Oh yeah, 1000%.
So anybody who listened to our release episode that we just kind of put out as bonus content this morning, the long-awaited Nintendo Switch 2 details are finally here. And there are a lot of details for us to go over: the game reveals, pricing, hardware features, exclusives, lots of things. But I think I would be understating the point to say that there's a lot of details that have been pretty divisive. And certainly the other two hosts have some opinions about this. I feel that my own personal stance on the Switch 2 release has been pretty pragmatic. I'm more of a business sympathizer than perhaps the other two gentlemen are. But we wanted to, again, get the viewpoint of somebody who is really coming from this from a devoted fan sort of perspective. Mo, so just jumping right into this, what are your overall initial thoughts on the Nintendo Direct?
Overall, I could not have been just any more satisfied with it, really. Like we're finally getting at least some version of 4K, and I use 4K very loosely. It's from Nintendo. We're getting GameCube on the NSO, which that was my childhood console. That is my nostalgia console right there. Getting GameCube is a pipe dream. We're getting a new Kirby Air Riders. Again, GameCube pipe dream right there. We're getting the biggest Mario Kart ever. And we're finally returning to the age when third parties are not just porting 10, 12-year-old games, but actual current gen games to a Nintendo platform because the hardware can somewhat keep up with it. So we're really in a good spot, at least to me.
Was there any particular announcement in the lineup that made you go like, wow, like just totally knock your socks off?
Definitely the Kirby Air Riders announcement. It's a sequel to that. Panzer in the server can attest. So while I was streaming, so while I was streaming my reaction to it, I legit started beating on my chair, just screaming, yes! Because that was one of my favorite GameCube games, and we haven't heard from it since it released. And to learn that that's been Sakurai's mystery game that he alluded to on his YouTube channel, that makes me so happy. But it also leaves a lot of curiosity about where is Smash Bros. Going to go from here.
Yeah, and that was in our. It's funny, we recorded our Thursday episode before the actual Nintendo release, and we were kind of speculating whether or not Smash Brothers would be an anchor title, like a release title. We were expecting that we wouldn't get a new Legend of Zelda property. We were hoping that we were going to get a new 3D Mario property. We were not expecting them to, sort of hang their hat on Donkey Kong. And so Smash Brothers was kind of what we were thinking they were going to, to present as really an anchor title. Now, we did get other Mario properties like Mario Kart, which, I'm not a Mario Kart player, but I got to say it looked fantastic. How do you feel about Smash Brothers not being included as a launch title, or at least not presented as one?
Right. At least to me, it sort of feels like Sakurai and and I'm sort of limited may be in the same position that fans are thinking about is where do you go after Ultimate? Because it literally was the ultimate version of Smash Brothers. They had the most insane roster ever, some amazing stages. The music vault was fantastic. And it's probably incredibly difficult to figure out how to revamp or reboot that series going forward.
That's an interesting thought. So my favorite fighter of all time is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I love the sprite era arcade fighter style. When Marvel vs. Capcom moved to 3D, or Street Fighter moved to 3D for that matter, it sort of took me out of it. But if I were to say, how could you improve on Marvel vs. Capcom 2? I would say the mechanics are great, the sprites are great, give me more characters and more stages. And I kind of feel like that same logic extends to Smash Brothers. Yeah, you have a gigantic roster in Ultimate, but like, could you fit in more? Yeah, absolutely. Are there other IPs that you could sort of dovetail in there? Absolutely. And I think for people who really like Smash Brothers, that is a workable formula. And I don't think it is a bad thing at all. If you just give, sales ultimately is giving people more of what they want and less of what they don't want. And people love Ultimate and just keep adding to it. That was kind of my thought on it. But do you think we'll see Smash Brothers in the first, year or so?
The first year, I would say about a 30% chance, but definitely sometime within the next 2 to 3 years, I think we'll at least see the announcement for what's next for Smash.
Right on. So I wanted to bring this up to you, kind of shifting into the business side of this whole equation. We were discussing the price point that was released for the Switch 2. I wouldn't say that Nintendo has necessarily competed as the low cost option in the console space, but historically, when you look at like GameCube, which you mentioned earlier, and Switch, they have come in initially at a lower price point than their competitors. We're sort of mid-generation right now. PS5 has been around for a while, Xbox has been around for a while, and they probably won't be releasing another generation for at least the time being. But the Switch coming in at $449 was a bit of a surprise to me. Do you have any feelings about that?
Um, so I'll sort of break this into three parts. It's the Nintendo part, the Xbox part, and then the overall part, because those are the sort of hands in the pot that I'm the most familiar with right now. I think this price wasn't Nintendo doing the best they could to keep that lower competitive edge given everything that's going on. Be- because just keeping politics out of it, but just the financial state, these tariffs are having an effect on them. And that cost is going to come down to the consumer, unfortunately. I feel like it, and maybe even up until January of this year, Nintendo had planned for 399/400 to be their price point. But then as things started popping up is when they sort of pushed up into the 450. My bigger concern is the price of the games themselves that
Mm.
we've now seen are reaching into that 80-90 range. Because quite frankly, I was thinking GTA 6 would be the first game that was going to push past 70, but Nintendo beat Rockstar to that punch.
There's rumors of it being $100 game.
Oh yeah, which I definitely see whatever sort of definitive edition they do that'll give you a 3-day early access will at least be 120, no doubt. But the days of going into Walmart and finding a $50 GameCube on rollback, those are long gone, unfortunately. But given everything that Nintendo has shoved into this console, just giving an 8-inch HDR and 120 hertz screen, having the microphone, having the Joy Cons with the magnets, everything that's included with it, 450. Of course, I would have loved for it to be less, but it's not a horrible price point. And at the same time, we can also look to things like the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG Ally and the Lenovo Legion. That's going to be Nintendo's closest bit of competition going forward. Are these PC handhelds? Because Xbox and PlayStation are sort of still vibing on that high end market. They're for the look. These are for the competitive gamers. So that need those high frame rates. Still want those gorgeous games on their giant HDR televisions. Nintendo is still trying to balance it out between their diehard fans and being more suitable for children who are still the ones playing Pokemon on car rides up to grandma's and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you just made, though. If we're saying that part of this is that they are gearing towards a younger audience, making the games more expensive is I think a barrier to entry. I I think just in general, like I don't have a problem with the price point. I think that it is a kind of an awkward price point to be 449 instead of 499 or 399. Like that just seems a little unusual for it to kind of be mid hundreds like that. I can't think of another piece of hardware that came out like maybe GameCube actually, or like being 250 or something, but the 449 is an awkward price point for me. But ultimately, I think, things are worth what people are willing to pay for them, and Nintendo has a diehard audience. My big concern, though, is that Nintendo, I think, has historically, at least over the last few platform generations, has been about the easy access social gaming, where you bring, your kid, you got your like 3 generations of family gaming at the same time. Grandma, dad, and little baby Timmy, little baby Mo are playing a game together. And I like that. I've always considered that to be a market differentiator for Nintendo. And the fact that they have a built-in mic, but not a built-in camera, and that the camera is an additional $50 peripheral, I don't know. I would have rather seen a $500 price point or even a $600 price point and have them go, look at this full robust machine that you get with this. This is an all-in-one social gaming device, and that is how we're going to compete against these other guys. Are we going to compete on graphics? No. Are we going to compete on upgradable hardware? No. But when you buy this machine, you are buying a stable platform that is going to allow you and your family to have access to gaming memories that you're making for years and years to come. And it all comes packaged into this nice little package. I personally question having that pared down version where they're kind of removing what I feel are like essential parts of the experience just to get the price point down a little bit, to forfeit. Like, even if you just include the camera for $50 and make it a $500 console, I don't know. Something about that just feels better to me. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, at first I was sort of just in the same boat as you, but because there were a bunch of rumors going around up until the hardware reveal back in January of people saying it's going to have a camera included in the system. And and of course that immediately makes us think back, oh, so like the 3DS or the DSi. But just like you said, I really think it comes down to Nintendo is trying to juggle and do a balancing act to keep the price point somewhat different from all the higher end handheld PCs, because once you get past that $500 threshold, it becomes, well, why don't I just get a Steam Deck and just emulate everything? Why don't I just get a ROG Ally because I can upgrade the graphics card in there? And it sort of loses that Nintendo spunk.
Hmm.
But on the flip side, what I hope is that the camera being a separate attachment is a somewhat calling to say, hey, there are going to be other things too that you can add. What those other accessories could be, I don't know. But
Hmm.
now having just those two ports instead of just the one on the bottom, yes, it'll be great for charging while you're in tabletop mode. Yes, it'll have the camera. But knowing Nintendo, they got something else up their sleeve that they'll announce, be it a year from now or in half a year or whatever. And we're gonna go, huh? Insane.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And I would say I just hope they're able to deliver on it. The Switch famously has that IR detector in one of the Joy-Cons, and I don't really know of many games that have done it much with it. But I admire Nintendo for their innovation, and that's a good thought, Mo. I hadn't thought about that. If the camera was just sort of like the first little peek into, further immersive innovation, and perhaps there's other peripheral devices that they, might be looking to add on to that. While we're kind of talking about the user interface stuff, did you have any thoughts on the new controller, the new Joy-Cons, the C button that they, spent quite a bit of time talking about in the direct? How do you feel? Do you feel like the new features to the Joy-Cons are good? Do you feel like they're like genuine good enhancements, or do they feel a little gimmicky to you?
As far as the C button goes itself, I think that was it's neither a gimmick nor revolutionary. It was a very necessary evolution because Xbox and PlayStation have both already had their versions of it for quite some time now. Just taking you to the Xbox Home or the PlayStation Hub. But Nintendo never really had that. It just immediately took you out of the game. So my hope is that for this, it'll finally sort of be that integration. The most underwhelming part of it for me was the fact that it's yet again Nintendo doing just Nintendo, that they didn't go the route of like Xbox and directly integrate Discord, which I personally love being able just to hop onto the VGP server while I'm on my Xbox and get into Marvel Rivals or whatever we're playing. But instead, this is Nintendo's own thing that you can see clearly looks just like Discord, even down to the game sharing icon. But it's Nintendo, and goes back to their sort of youthful look of, hey, we need to make this our thing so that we can make it safe for the younger audience. Because a lot of parents, when they think of Nintendo, they think of that sort of trustworthiness that they can go, oh yeah, I can let little baby Bobby play on a Nintendo. It's Nintendo. But then they'll get scared of like Xbox and PlayStation because that's where the more mature games are seen as going. Even though right now we're somewhat getting back to 90s ish when it comes to that regard. Because another thing that I've seen a lot of is people saying, what if Switch 2 is just another Wii U situation?
Mm.
I think this is much closer to an SNES upgrade than a Wii U iteration, in the sense of this is taking something that was incredibly successful and just fine tuning it like they did with the SNES. And so Nintendo can still compete and they're still bringing in all these third parties. Whereas, unlike that, it's when they went from the Wii to the Wii U, they tried to make it come across through marketing as this is the next best Wii, but instead it was a completely different thing, and they fumbled the marketing so people thought it was literally just an accessory for the Wii.
Well, not only an accessory for the Wii, but I think that people just didn't know what to do with it. It's funny though, because without the Wii U, I don't know that we would have had the Switch. Like the Wii U seemed like a interesting stepping stone in Nintendo's development process, where they go like, we know we want to go handheld, we know we want to go mobile. How do we do that? People still want to play on their TV. Let's figure out some weird hybrid. And I think they nailed it with the Switch. I do like your thoughts though. The Switch 2, I mean, even the fact that they're calling it the Switch 2, very, very reminiscent of Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo Entertainment System, that where it's more of a like distilling what worked and enhancing it than trying to re-evolve the platform. I like that. That's a good way to think about it. And you touched on the protectiveness of your typical Nintendo consumer, where they've got their kids playing on it and stuff. And I think that is also a valuable a value proposition for Nintendo, is that they have done such a good job of protecting their own IP and making it sort of everybody's console. Like, I think anybody across generations would have a good time playing a Mario Brothers game or a Donkey Kong game or even Metroid. You know, Metroid, you have really solid shooter mechanics, really challenging difficulty settings, but in a way that isn't, you know, like Elden Ring level violence and purgatory and stuff that you're subjecting people to, which therein, I think there's a little bit of brand confusion for me. There's a part of me that feels like Nintendo almost went through a little bit of an identity crisis when they were trying to share what the Switch 2 is. They seemed to spend a lot of time talking about what it does and not so much what it means. And like, if I think about another like sort of like rebel in the home electronics space, I think of like an Apple, and it's kind of weird to even consider them to be the rebel now because they're ubiquitous. Most people have an iPhone. It's the most popular form of consumer electronics that exists in the world. Many people switch to app or to Mac, but the reason they've been able to do that is they were able to communicate like what it means, like why you should invest in this Apple product. Like, you know, it's not, hey, we have the highest resolution and the most intuitive software platform. What they go is they go, we are Apple. We are rebels and innovators in the home electronic space, and we put style on the same platform as substance. And we reject the status quo. And wouldn't you love to be a part of this? Nintendo, I think, has the same sort of advantage going for it in that they aren't competing in the same playground as like a Sony or an Xbox is. But I don't think they did a really good job of communicating what exactly they're hoping to get people to feel from this new Switch. You are a diehard Nintendo fan. Do you feel like their messaging resonated with you?
Yes and no. I really do love your comparison to Apple because in a lot of similar ways, Nintendo is entering a very similar point as Apple was at whenever Steve Jobs passed away. The Switch was the last console that Satoru Iwata had his hands and his vision on,
Interesting
and
parallel.
and
Interesting.
his whole thing was a blue ocean strategy. That back in the GameCube and Wii era, Satoru Iwata, whenever he took over as president, talked a lot about how he came from a game development background. He understood the importance of innovation. He understood the importance of always giving the consumers what they need, surprising them, elevating them, and working for the creative aspect of it. That's why the Wii didn't care about being an HD console at first. That's why the Wii played so hard into the casual games and why we had such hits like Wii Sports and Wii Play and things of that nature. And now the Switch 2 is the first console that Iwata was not a part of. So this is a big transition period for Nintendo. And and a great point of it was how the direct had three very new directors being the MCs of the direct, whereas usually we'd have
One
people
person.
like Miyamoto
Mhm.
or people from that elder sort of generation. Whereas now Nintendo is obviously saying, hey, we are passing the baton off because we know that Miyamoto's time is limited. We know that Sakurai's time is limited. We know that all these people who have been making Nintendo games and products for decades upon decades now are leaving the fray. So we need to sort of gear up these new people to fully take over.
That's a really interesting parallel. I hadn't even considered that the actual leadership had changed, and honestly, it kind of makes me think a bit deeper into, I guess, what everyone's concern is, like the Switch 2. You know, is this daring enough? And you know, it's probably not. You know, it's probably a safe evolution, But what you had mentioned earlier about perhaps enhancing that as we go down the line with peripherals to really level things up as the console ages, could be a game changer there. Did you have any other thoughts on the new controller advancements? There's the mouse enhancement, and hopefully they got the controller drift under control. What about the controllers excited you, disappointed you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm I'm very hesitant until I can actually get my hands on one just to see how it feels and how the mouse control actually works in game. The only game that we really saw utilize them in the direct what was Drag Cross Drive, which is this like wheelchair basketball game, which one I'm excited for because I love representation of people with disabilities. So I think that's a fantastic part of it in and of itself. But I don't know how I feel about that dual mouse mode, how much how much friction and traction you're going to need on whatever table surface you
Mm,
have, how much the new HD Rumble is going to affect it, how the scrolling actually feels. There's a lot still that is unknown. And over the next few weeks, as people have these live play experiences, I'm sure we'll learn all about it.
for sure. Are you excited at this point for those? I mean, do you feel like that could?
I'm
I'm
intrigued. I'll put it that way. But I'm hesitant to say excited because it very well could just not feel natural and not feel good. So I'll just go, and pull out my Pro controller and keep playing that way.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I play with my Pro controller on my Switch. Like that's my preferred way to play, and it's because it is just a more natural. That's what I grew up playing on were controllers, and having that controller in my hand, there's something comforting about it. It feels natural at this point. I feel like a lot of the enhancements that controllers have made over the years, especially with regards to motion control, they end up being kind of like neat little novelty things in a lot of games. This isn't just Nintendo, by the way. This is across the board.
Yeah.
They end up being neat little novelty things that are kind of disposable, in the grand scheme of things. Like there'll be some games that are like, oh, that's kind of fun that I get to or have to do this. And then it'll be like an aiming feature in another game, and I'll just go, nah, I'm gonna use my thumbsticks. But if anybody can pull it off, it's Nintendo. I guess we'll see how that rolls out. So, among the technical things that they discussed in the direct, there were lots of games, which I think we'll all agree it doesn't matter how awesome your system performs from a technical level, it doesn't matter if the games aren't right. The games have to be fun to play. And so we had some launch titles that a lot of us were expecting, like Mario Kart, I think was probably the safest bet for everybody. But then we had a few other, what I would consider to be like technical display type games, like this Welcome Tour seems very much like an Astro's Playroom. The new Hyrule Warriors, which is Dynasty Warriors, in Link cosplay. How did you feel about some of these more predictable launch titles?
The the Nintendo 2 World Tour thingy, that one, the Welcome Tour,
Mm-hmm.
that was the most underwhelming slash disappointing announcement of the direct to me because it 100% is Nintendo's answer to Astro's Playroom, except they're charging for it. They're they're repeating the mistake that they made with 1-2 Switch, where it should have just been a pack-in game to
Yep.
go, hey, here's how this console works. But Nintendo, they're always going to charge that Nintendo tax because they can.
Well, I wouldn't say that's necessarily always the case. I mean, the Wii came packaged with Wii Sports,
True.
and I think that Wii Sports, without giving everyone access to that fun, way to experience their crazy new controller and all these motion controls, I don't think that the Wii would have been as successful if it didn't come packaged with that.
That, that's very true. I honestly don't know how well the Wii would have taken off because yes, they had a great marketing campaign, but it was definitely a hard push to make that console what it was, because literally no one could have predicted that you'd have grandma playing Wii bowling with you. And even to this day, a lot of retirement homes still have Wii's hooked up it in their main like day rooms at the retirement home, because older people still love playing Wii Sports specifically. They want to play bowling or play golf with each other.
Yeah, lots of people owned Wii's just for Wii Sports and probably never bought another game. And I think if you would have added that barrier to entry and said, hey, here's our Wii. Oh, but you also have to buy this game. People wouldn't have bought it. You know what I mean? It just seems like such a miss. And I understand, like there's a reason why console prices are going up. It is getting more and more expensive, whether it's tariffs or just, any other number of economic conditions that we can't really discuss too much on this show, but there's a reason why pricing goes up, and the market will correct itself to match what people are willing to pay for things. But right now that everything's going up, I just think, again, this is one of those things where if this is a integral way for you to show people how to use this new wonderful device that you're putting in their home, you should figure out a way to package it with the system. Make the system $500, include the camera, include World Tour or Welcome Tour, and remove the nickel-y dimey stuff, or at least offer that as a package. Like, hey, this is our standard package, the Nintendo Switch 2, which comes with everything you need to just get started. You pull it out of the box and boom, you've got this social device available to you to just hit the road running with your family and have a great time. Oh, and by the way, if you're not interested in these extra features, we've got this pared down version too.
Right. And they somewhat tried that with the Wii U, where they had the 8 GB white model and then the 32 GB black model, but that 32 GB one came with Nintendo Land, which was the pack-in title, and even still trying to do that dual approach of, hey, you can get the more souped up version or just the basic set. They literally called it the basic set, the 8 GB one. So I feel like maybe the Wii U scared Nintendo from that, or they
That
genuinely don't see these as necessary games. I'm not sure.
That's a great point. That is a great point. You're right. It's perhaps an intentional decision on their part, coming off the heels, not the heels of the Wii U, but learning from that experience of the Wii U. That is a really good point, Mo. That's a really good point. How do you feel about the ports and the third-party games? So you mentioned GameCube earlier. A lot of people grew up with GameCube as their primary console, although it was the least popular least popular besides the Dreamcast of the consoles at the time. Do you feel like that's a big win? Do you think that a lot of people are going to be taking advantage of that GameCube emulation?
If it's done right, um, at least from what I've seen so far, and we don't have the official pricing yet from Nintendo, but it looks like this is going to be either in an increased price for the expansion pack tier, or it's going to be a whole new tier of an NSO that people will have to pay for. And even then, it really depends on how well the emulation runs on the new Switch. Because there's a massive difference in file size and game size when you compare N64 games to GameCube games. This is going to be the biggest NSO app by far. That's why a lot of people thought that Nintendo was going to skip GameCube for NSO and go straight to DS so they could stick with those lower file sizes. So we'll see. I hope they run well, but we can tell from like the fact that they're doing the GameCube version of Wind Waker that it's gonna be parsed down at least somewhat. Like they're not going the full route of giving us the Wii U HD enhanced version.
That makes sense. And on that same note, when we're talking about, the file sizes being a inhibitor, do you, one of my predictions for this iteration of the Switch was that they were going to be bringing on big AAA titles that were just beyond the first Switch's computing power, like your Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077. Do you think that those are a good match? Do you think that that's a win for this platform?
I definitely do. This seems to be the most third party competitive that Nintendo has been since they lost a lot of third party support to Sony whenever Sony released a PlayStation 1. Because you gotta remember, prior to the PS1, it was just Nintendo and Sega. But really, it was just
Sega.
Nintendo. It was really just Nintendo because they had such a chokehold on all the third parties saying, hey, when you develop for us, you can only develop for us. And your games have to have our Nintendo official seal of quality. You have to go through all of our rigorous checks. And then once Sony came in with the PlayStation, that's when Square Enix, formerly Squaresoft, said, nah, buy Nintendo, and they went over to PlayStation. And that started the whole avalanche of other third parties going to other platforms. But this, seeing such massive third party support right out of the gate, I think and hope is a really good sign. Like you already heard that CD Projekt Red for their port of Cyberpunk, they're going to be one of the first companies to use the new 64 gigabyte cartridges.
Yeah, and to further enhance that point, the fact that we've got a FromSoftware exclusive for the Switch 2, I think is a huge, probably the biggest surprise example of what you're talking about that third-party support. I mean, you're talking about one of the most beloved software producers in the space these days, with literally a whole subgenre of games that has been coined around their property, Souls-like games like Elden Ring and Bloodborne that have been huge commercial successes. They have an exclusive now for the Switch 2 with this game, the Duskbloods, which was a huge shock to Josh, Ryan, and myself. Now, the thing is, though, is that getting back to kind of like Nintendo's core identity and what I consider to be their brand strengths are, they're not necessarily the graphical powerhouse. They're not necessarily this thing that competes with 100 to 150 hour games that are deep and immersive and violent and stuff. But I could see it both ways. Do you need these grittier games to keep the adult population engaged with your new platform? Are they really going to be driving the sales? I would love to hear your thoughts on what this means for the Nintendo Switch. Bringing a AAA title from a hard edge studio like FromSoftware in the Duskbloods into this game, into this console. I guess we're not going to be seeing it for a while. It's 2026, but what do you think this means for Nintendo?
Right. I'm not even a massive fan of Souls-like games. I've tried Dark Souls 1 and 2. I've tried Elden Ring. I've tried Bloodborne. I just could never get them to sort of click with me. But even I can acknowledge and respect how massive this is. And I immediately, of course, started seeing memes online of Bloodborne for Switch, Bloodborne 2 confirmed. And it's a massive deal. Not only getting a new FromSoft game, but it's exclusive and not to a Sony platform. That is huge, not just for Nintendo, but for AAA devs in general. It's showing that, hey, Nintendo can handle what we're making these days. Hey, this hardware is good enough for us, guys. We promise. I
Yeah,
don't think it plays against their brand, but it's helping to expand it. I'm forgetting which school did it, but there was a university that did a study sometime in the past 3 or so years that said that over 80% of gamers are between the ages of 19 and 34. So that adult market is there in droves.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love what you just said, the point you just made, where it's not even necessarily that this is just an exclusive game in a very in vogue subgenre of gaming categories. Souls-like games are one of the most popular subcategories of games right now. But as a testament to like, hey everybody, hey world, look what we can do. We're in the party now, What I am hoping, though, that they do is that they are able to utilize that approach in a way where they're not just trying to compete directly against like your Sonys and your Xbox or your PC platforms. And an example of what I mean by that is the newer Legend of Zelda games. So Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were beautiful, gorgeous, immersive, fun games that played to the strengths of the Switch, where you don't necessarily need to have the fastest frame rate or the clearest, most realistic visuals. You have a style that works for your platform and that is pleasing to the eye and works whether you're blowing it up on a 100-inch TV or on your little, your little Switch screen. I'm hoping that they are able to incorporate some element of that into this new FromSoftware game, because I agree, especially with the color you just added to that, this could be potentially a game changer for them to stay relevant in the big boy, AAA gritty, dark, violent sort of game space. I have one more question for you, game related though.
Okay.
So the big launch title that they seem to be hanging their hat on, Nintendo, is the new Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong Bonanza. Thoughts?
Like most people, I was fully expecting a new 3D Mario game. It's just timing line wise, it lines up perfectly. We haven't had a new 3D Mario since Odyssey, essentially when the Switch launched a couple months later. And we're coming up on Mario's 40th anniversary. It feels like this is the perfect time to get that new 3D Mario out. So putting out this new DK game feels to me like they're more focused on their external media e- expansion than we all realize. But behind everything, Nintendo is also opening up new theme parks. Like they just opened up the new Donkey Kong Land a few months ago. They're doing movies. They're building even more theme parks. They built a Nintendo museum over in Japan. It's clear that Nintendo, on top of being very prominent in gaming, is trying to expand and still solidify themselves in media in general and in entertainment in general. So I feel like they've chosen DK, one, because they heard a lot of the fan feedback to where is DK, and two, because they're trying to keep that in the forefront so they can sell more things in other avenues, not just in the video game sphere. Of course, we still have a lot of 2025 yet, so I feel like maybe in the June showcase that they'll most likely do, just like every company does, maybe that's when we will see the new 3D Mario game, and hopefully slated for like holiday this year.
I could see that. And again, great point, Mo. I love your insight into this. Nintendo has been doing quite a bit to expand their overall portfolio into other entertainment spaces. The theme parks in particular have been doing quite well. The movie, the Super Mario Brothers movie did exceptionally well, whether you liked it or not. I did. And Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong seems like a great way to continue to move that. It is a popular title. The games have great integrity. All of the games have been solid. I think there was just some concern about whether or not that is a solid enough anchor title to really move consoles. But I could see a strategy where they go, okay, well, we are ramping up production to have this thing released in June. Donkey Kong is the safe bet. We'll see what that does to move the needle. There's projection numbers that they can run to see whether or not they're going to be able to meet fulfillment and stuff for the actual sales and pre-sales. And then depending on how that goes, we can then show our hand for Mario Brothers sooner or later. I think, if what we're really looking to capitalize on is a winter 2025, holiday season release to really push the bulk of our systems, and we've got that ace in the hole of the new 3D Mario in our pocket, I could see that as a good, solid business strategy. That's a really good point. So Mo, we're starting to run out of time here, but before we go, I wanted to get your final verdict as a super fan on the Switch 2. What are you going to be pre-ordering this?
Assuming I can beat at least one bot, because let's be honest with ourselves. Let's be completely honest. The pre-orders will sell out. It's just how the sales go these days. We've seen it with GPUs for PCs. We've seen it with other consoles. It's gonna sell out. But thankfully, Nintendo is doing a lot of stuff on their website for their direct sales to help combat scalpers. But give me some DK Conga Bongos. Give me Donkey Kong Jungle Beat on NSO. I'm gonna be there day one. You know it. You
I
know it.
love it. I love it. I love it. Mo, it's been fantastic talking to you, partner. Really, really cool to be able to do an episode like this with you. Is there any place that people can go to follow you and your streaming?
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Twitch at Mobox Gaming, on Twitter at Mobox Gaming, pretty much anywhere at Mobox Gaming. You can find me. Come say hi. And honestly, more than anything, join join the video game podcast server. I swear these guys have forever changed my life. I love being a part of the community. They are some of the best people you will ever have the blessing of meeting and just chatting with and gaming with.
I love it. Thank you for the plug, Mo. I will attest to that. The Discord community that we have is awesome. If you don't believe us, just come in and take a look. The link will be in our YouTube description here. As always, if you have the opportunity, please like, comment, share this video. It goes a really, really long way to help keeping an independent podcast like us going. If you feel like contributing in a more, fungible way, please check out our Patreon. The link will be there in our description as well. And at this time, that's all we've got for you, everybody. So until next time, happy gaming.
See ya.